Welcome back to our first video in a new series. We are going to start exploring VBA, but for the Publisher application, so Microsoft Publisher. I was doing a little bit of research out there and I realized that there's not a ton of content when it comes to Publisher VBA, but I know a few people personally who do use Publisher pretty heavily in their day-to-day job. And I know a lot of people like real estate agents, people like marketing departments and stuff like that who really rely on Publisher VBA, or sorry, just Publisher in general, in order to make content and stuff like that. So we are going to explore how we can automate our interaction with Publisher using VBA. Now, like pretty much every other series that we have covered when it comes to VBA, the first video is more of just exploring it. We have to understand, just again, like every other series, what is that object hierarchy that we need to start thinking about, and how do we do like the basic things, right? So every time we go in here, we have to understand, how do we get to the object that we need to get to? And we've seen this before with things like PowerPoint, things like Word, things like Excel. We know there's a hierarchy behind the scenes that we need to understand in order to effectively write the code that we need to. So we've seen in Microsoft Word, for example, that we start at the application level. We know there's a documents collection. We can then grab a specific document. And then once we have that document, we can go one step lower and we can go into sections, so part of a document. Then we can go into paragraphs, so actual paragraphs, and we can go into sentences and then words and then individual characters. With Excel, we have the application again. We have a workbooks collection, an individual workbook. We then have sheets. We then have ranges of cells, and then we have individual cells, which can contain content. With PowerPoint, we have, again, the application at the highest level. And then we go to our presentations collection, so all the presentations that are inside our PowerPoint application. Then we have individual presentations. Then they're made up of slides, and then those slides are made up of shapes, and then those shapes have content inside of them. So how does Publisher follow a similar hierarchy? Well, with Publisher, we again start at the application level. And then from there, we have documents. So just like Word, we have documents that we can have open. And then those documents are broken into pages. And so to give you a little bit of a notice right here, you can see that we have pages. So our documents are organized into pages. So sort of like, what is it? Microsoft Word. Now, I will say that Publisher, it's a little bit more explicit. We grab a specific page. And then once we have that page, we then have shapes. And those shapes are what we actually see on that particular page. And shapes can be many different things. They can be tables. They can be physical shapes like you're seeing in front of you. They can be pictures. And so depending on the type of shape that we are working with, we then have different things we can do with those shapes. So with that being said, we're going to walk through the process of enabling your developer tab on Publisher. And so that way, going forward, you can easily access the Visual Basic editor to not only write your code, but if necessary, run your code as well. To enable the developer tab, so this little tab right here, you would go over to File, and then you're going to go down to Options, so all the way down at the bottom. And then from here, you're going to go to Customize Ribbon. So that's basically the second section and the first item in that section. And then from here, it's broken into two panes. You have your commands, and then you have your tabs. You'll notice that this one, by default, is going to be unchecked. If it's unchecked, it means it's not enabled. If it is checked, like so, it means it's enabled, and you will be able to see it from the ribbon. Once you do that, you would then just press OK. And now you should be able to see your Visual Basic Editor tab, or more specifically, your developer tab. To then access the Visual Basic Editor, you would then click over here to the Visual Basic icon. This will bring up a new window, and inside of this window, you will see a couple different panes. So the first one over here is your Project Explorer. So you can have multiple projects open in Visual Basic. This is your code pane. So this is where you would actually write your code editor. You then have your immediate window. This is where if you write lines like this, where you say, hey, print out something, you would then see the result of this print in your immediate window. Additionally, you have your properties pane. This is where you can do things like change the name of your module. So you can see here working with pages. I could change this and give it a different name. So what you're going to do from here is you would right click on the modules folder, go down to insert, and then modules. Then give your module a name. So you can see how this one is selected. I'm going to call it introduction video. I already have an introduction module, so I can't give it the same name, but I'm going to be writing this from scratch. So I want to make sure that I have a different module name. Then from here, you can create a new subroutine. A subroutine is simply a collection of commands. It can range anywhere from declaring variables to setting objects to calling methods and properties. To create a new subroutine, it's going to be the sub keyword and then the name of the subroutine. So in this case, I'm going to call it introduction to publisher. Do your two little curved brackets. You'll then have that end sub pop right up for you. And then from here, we're going to start declaring our variables. So declare our variables. This is so we can leverage IntelliSense. IntelliSense is a feature that allows for code completion. This is a really nice feature because it allows you to write code a lot faster than trying to memorize all the syntax or having to go back between different windows to see, okay, well, what does the documentation say and stuff like that. Doesn't mean it's going to necessarily eradicate all of that, but it does make the code development process a lot quicker. So the first object variable that we are going to declare is going to be called pub app. This is short for the publisher application, and then this will be an application object. So that represents the entire publisher application, very similar to other applications we've worked with. And then from here, I'm going to create another object variable called pub doc. This will represent a document object, so a physical document. Now, as time goes on, we will explore how similar these documents are to traditional Word documents. This is something we've seen, especially with Outlook, because often what we'll find is that there's an actual object model inside of another object model. So with Outlook, not only do you have the Outlook object model, but if you return certain objects, you then get access to entire other object models like the Word object hierarchy. And then from here, we are going to declare a few more. The first one is going to be called pub pages. This represents the pages collection. So just like I said before, a document is organized into pages. This represents all the pages in your document. So if I want to grab all the pages, I would work with the pages collection. Now, if I want to work with a single page, then I need to declare a page object. This represents a single page from your pages collection from the current document that you're working with. So because you could technically have multiple documents open, you have to make sure you're working with the specific documents, because otherwise, if you're not, you could be potentially working with the wrong page. So always keep that in mind when you have multiple documents open. You want to make sure you are working with the right page. Additionally, we are going to work with some shapes. Now, for this one, I'm going to call it pub shapes. This will represent a shapes collection. This is all the shapes that is found on a specific page. Now, if I want to work with a single shape, then I'm going to declare a shape object. It's very important to keep in mind that shapes are broad. They're not very specific. A shape can be many different things in a document. It could be a table. It could be an image. It could be text art or something like that. So while this is a great entry point to interact with a shape, it's not going to tell us anything very specific about what we can do with that shape. So if it's an image, we might be able to do very specific things with an image compared to a table. So with a table, we could insert a row. With an image, you can't insert a row because it's not a table. So simply look at the shape as a very general form of an object. And then with that shape, we can get very specific objects from it. Now, one particular shape that we're going to be working with in this introduction is going to be a table. So I'm going to declare another variable called pub table. This represents a table object, which we will grab from a shape object. Okay, so then from here, what are we going to do? Well, let's first grab the application. So what we'll do is we'll set our pub app equal to the application. If I do Control J, I will be able to see all of my different objects. Just do the application property. And then if I want, I could print out different information about my application. You don't have to. A lot of times you don't need to do a lot with the application, but you can do things like, hey, maybe I want to get what's some interesting information? The language, let's do the name. So we'll print the application name. Keep in mind, you can't print every property because some of those properties do return objects. You can't print an object. You can print properties about an object if you want, but you just have to be careful. Let's do a path as well. So let's see what this information returns. So it looks like we are working with the Microsoft Publisher application, which was returned by our name property. And then this is the location of this particular application. It's found in the program files, Microsoft Office, root, Office 16. So this is probably where we could find the exe. Let's take a look and just see what happens. There we go. Woo. We can see here that if I expand it, and I probably go down, you'll notice there's some exe files. These exe files represent the different applications we can work with. And you'll notice here there's MSPub exe. So this is where our application is located. So we'll just print out some details about our application. Very basic stuff, nothing super fancy at this point, just getting us comfortable working with the objects. Okay, so let's go from here. What are some other things that we can do? Well, let's grab the pages collection. Remember, a document can be made up of multiple pages. So I'm going to create I'm going to set my pub pages variable equal to my application.activeDocument.pages. Oh, I skipped a part, of course. We also need to make sure we declare we have to set our pub doc object. So grab the active document. So I'm going to set the pub doc equal to the application and then active document. Now, in other applications, there is sometimes called this document or this workbook or this presentation. I don't know if PowerPoint has that. But in Publisher, unfortunately, we don't have access to that. So in other applications, say for Excel, we have this workbook object. Whenever you see this in front of the typical object, what that was representing was it represented the document or the workbook that contained the code that we were writing. So for example, I'm writing this code in my introduction.publisher document. So if I referred to this document, it would have returned the document that housed this code. However, with Publisher, we don't have that. So we do have access to the active document. And I believe if we go here, there is a documents collection. So we could get very specific. But because I only have one document opened at this point, I'm okay using the active document. But you do need to be careful because the active document refers to the document that your cursor is in. Now, by doing this particular line, I can write my code a little bit more concisely. So I can actually take this portion and replace it with pages. Now, something I can do with a collection, and you'll see this a lot, is you can do a count operation. So this will tell me how many pages are in my particular pages collection. Right now, you can see that there are one page inside of it. I can also do things like public order pages. I can add I can count, I can find page by ID and stuff like that. But that's for a different video. Okay, so we've talked about the pages collection. I want to grab the first page from that collection. So grab the first and only page in my collection. So I'm going to set that pub page object variable equal to my public or my publisher pages collection. And then I'm going to do the item property, and then I'm going to specify the first page. Now, what I can do from here is I will then print out the pub page, and then I want the name. Print out the page name, and then just for consistency's sake, print out the number of pages in our document. So let's see what this gives us. So you can see that my page is called square page. If I was to do this from the actual application itself, and I right click and then I do rename, you can see this is what the name of the page is. I can change it from VBA, or I can change it from the application itself using the user interface. So some other things that you might want to know is, for example, the width of the page, and you might also potentially want to know the height of this page. You will notice that some of the properties return different objects. So for example, if you go up to header, this will return a header object. If you return a background, that returns a background object. You can even grab the publisher application object itself. So you have to keep in mind when working with properties, sometimes it returns objects and sometimes it returns very specific data types, things like numbers or strings. So you always need to keep that in mind when you work with different properties and methods, is you need to know what is it returning back to me, because that's going to dictate what I can do with it. So something I want to do now is I want to create a table on my page. So let's add a table to page 1. So I'm going to set a publisher shape object equal to the page. There is a shapes collection, and with that collection, there are certain methods that add different shapes. So in this situation, I can add a ton of different shapes, but I want to add a specific shape. I want to add a table. With this, I can then specify some arguments to define how my table looks and things like how many rows and columns it has and where it's positioned. So for example, maybe I want my table to have 4 rows, and then I want it to have, let's say, 3 columns. And then I want it to have a left position of 100. And then I want it to have a top position of 100. And then width, I have 400 is equal to 400. And then a height is equal to 300. Now, keep in mind, there are a couple different arguments that you can specify, but if you don't, that's fine. It's not going to fail or anything like that. But these ones we should be specifying. Okay. And then from here, let's see what this gives us. Woo. And then I'm going to zoom that in. So we can now see we have a table on our particular document. I'm going to close this out again. I'm going to scoot this over here really quickly. And then, okay, so we know we have a shape at this point. How could we grab the table, the actual table itself? Well, this is a pattern you're going to see a lot. So let's grab the table. So the way we can do this is we can take this shape object up here, and you'll notice there's certain properties that are quite helpful. So for example, I will set my publisher table object equal to my publisher shape object, and you'll notice some things about it. There's callout, border art, connector, has table, has text frame, hyperlink, interesting. Link format. OLE format, this seems to be returning other objects. Interesting. Picture format. I wonder if there is. There's a table property that probably returns a table object. So what could I do with my table object? Well, I can see that there's rows. Maybe I want to count the number of rows in my particular table. So I will then print out the number of rows. What are some other things maybe I would want to get with my table? Well, maybe I want the number of columns. So let's see, after creating it, if we still have the right number of rows and columns. And then from here, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to show you how to add another page. So let's add another page to our document. So we will take our document object. There's a pages collection that we already have. So if we wanted to, we can either do it like this, or if we want it to be even a little bit more fancy, we could just take our pages collection. But just for some variety, I'll show you different ways to do it. And then I can do the add method. I'm going to say count. Well, how many do I want to add? I want to add 2, and I want to add them after the first page. So I want to add 2 pages after the first page. So let's run this and see what we get. Fancy, fancy. We have now 3 pages all together. It looks like we have the right number of rows and column as well. Alrighty. So that was our introduction to Publisher VBA. If you have any questions at this point, feel free to put them down in the comments below. In our next video, we are going to work more heavily with the page object specifically. So we're going to see how to do things like change the background color and just how to do some general things with it. Maybe get some more properties, maybe revisit some properties like width and height, and just doing different operations. So that way we can start getting familiar working with those objects. So that way, when we need to do more complex operations, a lot of the things don't look too foreign to us. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them down in the comments below. Otherwise, we will see you in video number 2.